Hello and what's up to you all accounting buffins. It is a lovely Thursday where you learn more and learn extra with us. My name is Abram and today's show we're doing it with Martin. It's been a while, Martin. How have you been?
It's been a while. I'm good, thanks, Abram. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and to all Mindsetters as well.
Of course. What are we up to today?
Okay, so today, Mindsetters, we're doing an important section called reconciliations, and we're focusing on specifically the chapter in the book about debtors reconciliations. You'll know that there are two types of reconciliations, debtors reconciliations and creditors reconciliations. Those are the two new aspects in the grade 12 syllabus to add to bank reconciliation, and today we're focusing mainly on debtors.
Nice one. I must say it's an expansion of what we were doing last week with Mahesh in terms of bank recon.
That's quite right, and we'll also be doing some creditors recon later on in later shows, so you can look at all the chapters, read them all together in our book.
Okay, so guys, to follow through with this, you need to get your notes, and it's simple. Go to learn.mindset.co.za, or alternatively, go to our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/learnextra. Currently, we have over 107,000 Mindsetters on the page, so make sure that you join our community and family, and let's help one another on the page, and let's make sure that we encourage one another, and, you know, learn together as a family. Also follow us on Twitter at LearnExtra. Today's show is probably brought to you by the Department of Basic Education, and the notes that we have for you are found on our workbook, which can be ordered for only 139 Rand. Simply send an email to sales@mindset.co.za and we'll help you through. Martin, take it off.
Okay, thanks very much, Aram. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at some summary notes first. These notes are available in the book, and I'm just going to highlight some key aspects that you need to master this section. So what you first of all need to be aware is that we are dealing today with managerial accounting. Managerial accounting, you should remember from previous years, is when we analyze trends in the business and when we take steps to make good management decisions that allow us to ensure that we get the best profit and manage our finances and all our resources very well. So we're really trying to keep track of our debtors here. Debtors, remember, are people that owe you money, and it's very important to keep track of how much they owe you, who's paid, who hasn't paid, who's a problem debtor and who you should write off, who's a person that is a good debtor and pays on time, and that's going to depend on what decisions you make in the business on who to grant credit to. So what we've got here is we've got the debtors control account, which you should be very familiar with from grade 10 accounting. The debtors control account is literally the T account that allows us to keep a record of our total debtors. That's why it's called debtors control. It allows us to control our debtors and always know how much money is owed to us by all our debtors in general. So remember, when you're looking at the debtors control account, it's your total debtors. And then there's a second part of control called the debtors ledger, and in the debtors ledger, also from grade 10 accounting, you should know that every debtor has got his or her own debtors ledger account, which is that little statement that says what each individual debtor owes you. So very, very important to know the difference. Your debtors control account is a T account in the general ledger, which has got your totals, and your debtors ledger account is the one that deals only with individual debtors. So what we're going to do is we're just quickly going to revise the various transactions that can affect the debtors, as well as the correct journals into which we have to enter them. And you can see over here that the transactions affecting debtors need to be recorded in journals. I've just put here the following books. We need to record when a debtor buys on credit. We know that that goes in the debtors journal, and the source document is an invoice. I'm just briefly running through this because you should know this by now. We've also got when a debtor pays his or her account. We know that we're receiving cash, so we're going to record that in the CRJ, and we're going to issue the debtor with a receipt. Then, if a debtor is given a discount, the discount is only given when a debtor pays you. You're not going to give somebody a discount if they haven't paid. And when they pay you, you'll also record that in the CRJ, and next to the receipt, you'll have that section on discounts allowed. Please make sure you revise your grade 10 stuff, because this is always a key component of debtors control. That's when we normally do it with the debtors ledger. You need to know that well. When a debtor returns goods, or very similar, if a debtor is given an allowance, what we do is we give that debtor a credit note and we put that in a DAJ. So you should remember that as well. The debtor is returning stock, or an allowance, which is almost the same but slightly different. That is, if we've overcharged the debtor by mistake, or if we've sold the debtor or forgotten to give the debtor a discount, we will probably give them an allowance afterwards in the CAJ. And then the final two that can happen to a debtor are both entered in the GJ. This could happen if we charge a debtor interest. So if a debtor hasn't paid for a long period of time and we want to give some type of incentive for the debtor to pay us, we can threaten the debtor with interest that we're then going to charge them if they haven't paid by a certain date, usually about 60 days after the sale. And then finally, you need to know that if a debtor is written off, we'll also put that entry in the general journal. So while this is a live show, maybe just think about what these two source documents are, and maybe send us a message on Facebook if you can tell us what are the source documents that are involved in the general journal when we charge a debtor interest or when we write off a debtor's account. Important to revise these transactions, you have to know exactly where they go, and you have to know where they affect the debtor's control account in the general ledger, and you also have to know where they are going to be recorded in the debtor's individual account in the debtor's ledger. So now what's going to happen is we've got these two accounts which we've mentioned before. We've got a debtor's control account, which remember we said affects the total, and we've got the debtor's ledger, in which we have got the accounts of the individual debtors. What we need to check at the end of every month is to check that the total of our debtor's control account, so the total in the debtor's control T account, I'm just going to abbreviate it as DC for debtor's control, that has to equal the sum of all the individual debtors. So you will take their balances of all their individual accounts and you'll add them up and you'll get some total, which is the sum of what each debtor owes you. You should remember in grade 10 we drew up a debtors list where you'd put all the debtors one below each other, debtor 1, debtor 2, debtor 3, debtor 4. Add that whole total up and you check that that is equal to the total that appears in your T account in debtors control. If that is not the case, in other words, if the individual debtors accounts do not equal the total in my debtors control T account, I've got a problem because there is a difference or a discrepancy between two separate parts of my books. My debtors control account is not matching the individual accounts of all the debtors. And that is when I need to do something called a debtors reconciliation. So remember, the word reconciliation means bringing things together, reconciling differences. If you reconcile with one of your friends and you make up after a fight, you're reconciling. The same as what we're doing here. We are reconciling the difference between the individual debtors accounts and the total in debtors control. So what would cause us to have a difference between the two is either we've made a mistake on one of the individual debtors accounts, or we've made a mistake on our total debtors control in our general ledger. And what often happens in a question is we've made many mistakes. We've made some mistakes on the individual accounts and some mistake on the total debtors control account, and that's where the reconciliation comes in order to bring the things together and update either one or the other to make sure that the total ends up being the same. This should be very familiar to you from bank reconciliation. Remember, bank reconciliation, you compare your bank statement to your bank general ledger account, and you correct any discrepancies in there in either the CPJ or the CRJ, and then prepare a bank reconciliation statement. This is exactly the same concept, except we're comparing two separate components of our books, in other words, debtors control and the debtors ledger, and we're checking to see where the differences are. So, what we've got on this page is some summary notes of the possible differences. So, what are the possible mistakes that we could make? And there's a mistake in the debtors list, or there's a mistake in the debtors control account, or sometimes both, and what we've got here is just a summary on where you should fix it. So I'm going to run through these little ones step by step so that you can see where everything goes. So the first possible mistake, the first possible error that you could have made, is if you've got a transaction which was not recorded at all. So this is an adjustment that we've made where we just forgot to record a transaction, or some new information has come in about a transaction that I haven't recorded. What that happens is, if an invoice was omitted, what we have to do is that's going to affect both the debtors control account and both the debtors list. So what we're going to do is adjust the debtors control account by the correct amount in the T account, and we're also going to adjust the individual debtors account in the debtors ledger. So what will happen is that we just haven't entered a transaction, we just have to now make the necessary entry. What's important to realize is that this transaction will not affect the reconciliation. It's not going to change the totals because we've just left something out. So if the debtors control account and the debtors list are both wrong, and we add that transaction that we haven't recorded, it's going to affect both totals and there isn't going to be a reconciliation. But you still have to record it because there's an error in your books. The second possibility is that if a transaction was recorded with an incorrect amount. I'm sure you've seen this very often even since grade 10. For example, you had a credit note that was recorded as 720 Rand instead of 270 Rand. This mindset is a mistake in recording, and so what we've got is that both our accounts are wrong. Both our debtors control and our debtors list are incorrect because we recorded the wrong amount. So what we have to do is work out the difference between the two amounts, and we have to update both the list and the ledger. I'm sure you know how to do that, just some revision. Okay, our next one was if the total of a journal was added up incorrectly. Or, when we call it in accounting terminology, when you add up the totals in a journal, we say that the journal has been cost. So what we've done is we've added up the wrong total. Now, what you need to remember here, mindsetters, is that whenever we're dealing with a total, in other words, the debtors control column in the CPJ, for example, or the sales column in the DJ, what has now happened is that we've only made a mistake in the debtors control account. We haven't made a mistake in the debtors list. Why is that the case? The reason is that the debtors control account deals with totals. Remember we said that earlier, the debtors control account deals only with totals because you take the totals from all of your journals and post them into the debtors control account, like you did in grade 10. However, the individual transactions on each line of the journal get posted to the debtors list. So if a total was added up incorrectly, the list is not wrong because all of the individual transactions have been posted correctly. So the one thing that is incorrect is that we must fix the entry by including the correct total in the general ledger. So an error of a total, remember, only affects the debtors control T account. Very important. Okay, now suppose that the entry is different and they say that a transaction was posted incorrectly to a debtor's individual account. So the question might say that we paid a debtor, or a debtor paid us 530 and it was posted as 350 to his individual account. Now the mistake is only in the individual account, which means that the mistake affects only the debtors list. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix the entry by putting the correct amount into our debtors list because it has no effect on the general ledger. The general ledger would have been correctly totaled because remember, totals go to the general ledger and individual amounts go to the individual accounts. Okay, now the next one, quite important, and this is one that people often get wrong. Let's say that we took a transaction and it was posted to the wrong side of a debtor's individual account. So we know that the transaction affects the debtors list only because we know that anything that has got individual debtors accounts only affects the debtors list. The key entry that we have to make here is that we have to double the amount and put it on the correct side. Double the amount and put it on the correct side. So let me give you an example. Let's say that there was a debtor bought stock for 1,000 Rand. So a debtor bought stock for 1,000 Rand. That means that the debtor's individual account has to go up by 1,000 Rand, got to increase by 1,000 Rand, so we need to put that on the debit side of the debtor's individual account. So we should have added 1,000 Rand to the debit side. Now suppose that we made a mistake, and by mistake, we put the 1,000 Rand on the credit side. What's now happened is that the credit side is 1,000 Rand too much, and the debit side is 1,000 Rand too little. So if we put it on the wrong side, we are actually out by 2,000 Rand, because the 1,000 Rand is on the credit side when it should have been on the debit side. To try and explain this a bit more clearly, first of all, we've got to cancel this incorrect credit, and the way we cancel an incorrect credit is we debit the account. So we're going to debit the account by 1,000 Rand to cancel out that credit. But now we're back to where we started from, because we've taken the credit out of the debtors ledger account and we've put it on the other side by debiting it. We still need to do the original entry. This 1,000 Rand should have been debited, so we actually have to debit the account again. We've got to debit it with another 1,000 Rand. So remember, the first debit is to cancel the incorrect credit, and the second debit is to ensure that the amount that should have been on the debit side is now on the debit side. So what that means is that a net effect is we're going to debit the account with 2,000 Rand in total. One entry, double the amount on the correct side. And then finally, last possible transaction that could happen is if instead of posting it to the wrong side of the debtor's ledger or debtor's individual account, suppose we've now posted it to the wrong side of the general ledger account. What that then means is that the debtor's control account in the general ledger is wrong, and again, because it's on the wrong side, we simply double it and put it on the correct side of the general ledger. Okay, so that is the theory that we needed to cover. We're going to now go to a practice question, but I think before that, I think it would be a good place to take a break.
Of course, Martin. Guys, thank you for joining us. And there's a guy on the page by the name of Trevor, clever guy, who says he's enjoying your accounting. So thank you for tuning in. Guys, we'll see you after this break. Welcome back, guys. Now you don't have to stress next year as a matriculant about where you're going to stay. South Point is giving you 1 year of free accommodation. All you need to do is to fill in the entry form that I have already posted for you on our Facebook page. Jump to facebook.com/learnextra and fill in that entry form, and your name will be in line to be drawn as the winner for next year. Winning is easy, guys. Now, Martin, I'm disappointed in the comments some of our guys are making. You know, I posted the question that you asked about the source documents. And someone said they really forgot. Honestly, like they just forgot.
Okay, well, I know that things happen and people forget. The truth is, if you remember General Journal, the General Journal has got two possible answers. Whenever something has got a source document in the General Journal, the answer is either going to be just a journal voucher. And I know 2 years have passed since you probably learned this in grade 10. So a journal voucher, and the other possibility is that we just have a journal narration. So important to revise some of the grade 10 work, because you could sometimes get an odd question or so that comes from the grade 10 syllabus.
Okay, let's continue.
Okay, so before the break, we looked at some of the theory that we had to go through, and I explained to you where we find the errors and where we reconcile the differences between the debtor's control account and the debtor's list. So here is a typical question that you could be asked, and there's a whole lot of information which I'm going to read through as we need it. First thing you need to be aware of is what the structure of the question is. They're normally going to give you a debtor's ledger and a debtor's control account, and what they've done is they've said here that the bookkeeper balanced the debtor's control account on the 28th of February, this is 2010, quite some time ago, and she calculated a balance of 24,900 Rand. So that means that our debtor's control account has got a balance of 24,900. What should we expect our debtors list to be? All of those accounts need to add up to 24,900, but look, there's a problem. She totaled the debtors list, and what she did is she calculated a balance of 2869. These two numbers don't equal. The pink figure and the yellow figure do not agree. We need to reconcile them somehow. And what they've done is they've given us a whole lot of points. They did a thorough investigation, and they've given us a whole lot of points which we're going to go through one by one to correct the errors. But there are some other questions that I'm going to deal with first before I come back to it. So the question has got some theory in as well. And the first question that we were looking at is that the question asked you, the first question said, identify the two errors that were made by the bookkeeper in preparing the debtor's control account. So we often have these inexperienced bookkeepers in the questions where we as grade 12 accounting students have to fix what the inexperienced bookkeeper has done. You've got more experience than the one in the question. So what you have to do is you have to fix the mistake that she has made in the debtor's control account. So let's look at the debtors control account, and we should see if there's anything that you can see that's incorrect. So here is the format of the debtors control account. Remember, it's a plus-minus account because it's an asset, and what we have here is the opening balance and a whole lot of different entries. So let's just quickly go through them. We know that the opening balance on the account should be on the debit side because we know that it's an asset, so it should have a positive balance on the debit side. Then, when we sell to a debtor, this is going to increase debtors control, so any sales from the DJ should actually appear on this side. So this entry is correct as well. But here it looks as if we have a problem. What the bookkeeper has done is she's put debtors allowances on the debit side of this account. In other words, debtors allowances are increasing debtors control. You should know, if you know this account very well, that debtors allowances actually have a negative effect on debtors control, because if a debtor returns stock to you, which would happen in the DAJ, what's actually happening is debtors control is going down. It's decreasing. The debtor owes you less money because she has returned goods to you. So this is our first mistake. The DAJ amount is on the wrong side. And you can just write it in words if you want to. If we go back to the question, we can just put DAJ amount should be on the credit side. So you can see there's already a reason why there's a mistake or why the two amounts don't balance. We can see that the bookkeeper has put the amount on the wrong side. So that's the first mistake that we've made. Always check to see whether the bookkeeper has made any mistakes in preparing your debtors control account. Okay, if we look at now the rest of the account, journal debits, we know if anything happens in the GJ, a debit will go on the debit side, so that's correct. Here is bank CPJ of 700. Bank CPJ, when would we use a CPJ entry in our debtors control account? When would we end up actually paying a debtor money? I hope you remember your grade 11 bank reconciliation, because this is actually from a dishonored check. So when a check is dishonored, you should remember that we cancel it by putting it in the CPJ. We received money from the debtor, and then after some time has passed, we discover that the check has been dishonored. We have to cancel that dishonored check in the CPJ. And if we cancel the check in the CPJ, what that means is that the debtor now suddenly owes us more money than before. So we should actually have put this entry of 700 Rand should actually have gone to the debit side. Remember, when you're dealing with a CPJ, bank is always credited because bank is decreasing, which means that the opposite entry should be a debit. So this is the second mistake. The bank entry should appear on the debit side of this account. I'll write that down as the answer in a moment, but let's just check that the others are okay. Bank and discounts allowed CRJ on the credit side. That's correct, because if a debtor pays me money, in other words, if I'm receiving cash from a debtor, what happens is that her account goes down, and we need to put the 51,100 on the credit side. And then finally, the journal credits of 1950, that's okay, because we know that credits from the general journal appear on the credit side of our debtors control account. So this is the second mistake, so we can just write a short sentence here in the answer book that error 2 is going to be that the CPJ amount should be on the debit side. So I hope that that makes sense. If you're not so sure, go back and revise how to deal with a dishonored check in the bank reconciliation section. Our workbook also has a section on bank reconciliation that you can go and look at to be sure of how to deal with a dishonored check from a debtor. Okay, let's look at the second question, which is also a sort of theory type question. What the question is asking is, explain the relationship and the similarity between the debtors control account and the debtors ledger. Well, I spoke about this earlier, and I'm not going to write the answer for you. I'm just going to tell you what the answer is. The relationship is that the total of the debtors list has to equal the total of the debtors control account. Remember, the debtors control T account is there to control what happens to my debtors. So the relationship, you can just write a sentence in any way that makes sense, that the total of the debtors list must equal the debtors control balance in the T account. We said that earlier. And if we look at the similarity would mean, what do the two accounts have in common? They all deal with debtors, but what you need to realize is that the similarity is that the individual accounts go into the debtors list, and the total goes into the debtors control. So the similarity would be that the total goes in debtors control, and the individual amounts affect the debtors ledger. So just go over that. It's just a theory question. I'm sure you all know how to do that from grade 10 already. Okay, so now we're getting to the reconciliation. So question 1.3 says, referring to the statement of account. Remember, the statement of account tells you what the debtor owes you. It's that extract that comes from the debtor's ledger that you send to the debtor in the mail, telling them, this is how much you owe me, please pay me. It says, according to the statement of account sent to G. Glasser, or referring to it, on the 28th of February, have the credit terms been correctly applied? So they're asking us, have the credit terms been correctly applied? Abraham, do you know what we mean by credit terms?
No.
Okay, I'm sure the mindset is, you may have heard this term before. Credit terms really mean what we allow the debtors. Every debtor will be given a discount if they pay in a decent amount of time, and every debtor will also be charged interest if they don't pay within a certain period of time. That mindset is what we call the credit terms. What are the terms of the credit agreement? How much time does the debtor have to pay before there are consequences? So we need to look at the statement of account, and we need to check whether the credit terms have been correctly applied. And the question says, in your answer, you must refer to both discount and interest. So those are the two things we're going to compare. Check to see, has the discount been correctly applied, and also check to see, has the interest been correctly applied. So they're asking us for G. Glasser's individual account. So what we need to do is we need to go not to the debtors control, because remember, that's the total debtors, just in case you've forgotten. We need to go to the individual debtor, which is the account of G. Glasser over here. So we will actually send this piece of paper to G. Glasser in the mail, telling him or her that 6,000 Rand is owed at the end of the period. What they're asking us is whether the discount and the interest have been correctly applied. So we need to read the credit terms, which we find at the bottom of this account. It says strictly 30 days. We're going to give a 2.5% discount if the person pays within 30 days. And we're going to charge interest at 2% per month on a 30-day overdue account. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is to check whether the discount has been correctly applied. So the discount is over here. Here's the discount that we allowed the debtor. And we allowed the debtor a discount of 140 Rand. Remember, you can only allow somebody a discount if that person pays you within a reasonable sort of time. You're trying to offer the debtor encouragement to pay you. You know, if you get a discount if you buy something early, or if you pay for something early, you will try to pay that amount early so that you can benefit from a discount. So we know that the discount should have been 2.5%, and it's 2.5% of the amount that was paid. So what we need to do is look at the receipt on the same day. Can you see that on the 30th, this debtor has paid us, we received money in the CRJ of 2,800 Rand. That 2,800 Rand, mindsetters, is the amount that the debtor paid us on the 30th of December, and we gave the debtor a discount on that amount, and we gave the debtor a discount of 140 Rand. What we now do to check whether the terms have been correctly applied is we grab our calculator and we check to see, we know that it should have been 2.5%. I've circled that figure over there. 2.5% should be the discount. So what we should do is we should work out 2.5% of 2,800. So 2,800 is the amount that the debtor paid, and it's times 0.025. 0.025 is 2.5%. You can also times by 2.5 over 100 if you want to. And we're going to check whether the answer is the 140 Rand that we gave the debtor in discount. But look, it's only 70 Rand. So we actually gave this debtor too much discount. We should have given the debtor 70 Rand discount, as per the calculation I've just done. But in fact, what we did is we gave the debtor 140 Rand discount. So we gave the debtor too much discount. Okay? So if you have to answer the question was, were the credit terms correctly applied? Was the discount correct? So for the discount, we will say no, and we need to give some kind of reason. So we should say the discount should have been Discount should have been 70 Rand. But we actually charged them or gave them a 140 Rand discount. So we actually gave them too much discount. If you work it out, you can actually see that the discount was 5%, because 5% of 2,800 is 140. We actually gave them double the discount that they were entitled to. So we can just say the discount should have been 70, and we gave, or the business gave, 140 Rand. So 2 marks there for saying no and for giving a correct reason. The second question that they asked here, remember, is they said, has the interest been correctly applied? And remember, we're supposed to charge a debtor interest if the debtor doesn't pay us. So if we look at the information here, it says that we should have charged the debtor 2% per annum, 2% per month on a 30-day overdue account. So now what we need to do here is look to see where there is interest. December, there's an invoice, a receipt, discount, invoice, credit note, invoice, invoice, invoice. Nowhere here has the business charged anybody interest. So there was no interest charged anywhere because these are just invoices and credit notes. They should, however, have charged interest because if you look at this, the debtor started with a balance of 4,600 Rand for something that they purchased on the 1st of December. Now, we are supposed to charge the debtor interest on that amount if they don't pay for 30 days. They paid some of the amount, so they paid 2,800 here, and we gave them a discount of 140 Rand, even though that should only have been 70 Rand, but there was still an amount outstanding. They didn't pay the whole 4,600 Rand. So therefore, we should have charged them interest, because by the end of January, this amount was still outstanding. There was still 6,000 Rand outstanding. They only paid us once throughout the whole period, so we actually should have charged these debtors interest. So the answer to the second question, was the interest correctly applied? The answer is no, because no interest was charged at all anywhere in the period. So you can simply write that as an answer. You can just say, no, the business should have charged interest on overdue debt. And they didn't. So I'm not going to write it in full, but you can really just say that the business should have charged interest, but this was not done. So it's very, very important to keep track of your debtors and control them this way, because you see there are 2 things that have gone wrong here. Number 1 is that the business gave way too much of a discount. They gave double the discount that they should have given because they didn't calculate the discount correctly. And number 2, the business could have earned some extra money on interest on overdue debt, and they didn't charge the debtor interest. So it's very important that the credit terms are adhered to, and that's what we do in debtors control to try and check that the business is managing its debtors correctly. Okay, so now let's look at the next part of this question. And the next part of the question says, calculate the amount of interest that must be charged to the overdue account of G. Glasser. So we've admitted that we haven't charged interest, and the question wants us to calculate the amount of interest that should have been charged. What you need to realize is that interest is only charged on debts that are overdue. And we need to check now, if we look at the information, which debts were overdue, and then we're going to charge 2% per month on those debts. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is look from the top down. I'll change the color so that you can see better. There was an invoice of 4,600 Rand. And then of that amount, the debtor paid 2,800 Rand. So there was 1,800 Rand outstanding. Then at the end of December, they purchased some more, so there was an amount of 3,930 Rand outstanding at the end of December. Now, what we want to do is that in January, we need to start charging them interest as soon as that debt becomes 30 days old. So in January, you should be able to see that this 4,600 was purchased in December. But they've paid 2,800 of it, and we've given the discount of 140. Let's assume that the discount was correct for the purpose of calculating the interest. We need to charge them interest on this 1,660 Rand, because most of this 1,660 Rand, or all of it actually, belongs to the 4,600 that they purchased on the 1st of December. So this debt is already old. It's already longer than 30 days old, because we're doing this at the end of February. This debt is already over 30 days old because it's been outstanding since the 1st of December. So that's the first part of our calculation. We need to calculate 2% interest on that amount. So I'm going to just do that quickly. It should be 1,660 Rand times by 2%. And we need to be very clear whether it is per month or per year. The question actually specifies that it is per month. Here it says 2% per month. If it was per year, we'd have to multiply by 1/12 because we're only charging interest for 1 month. So that's the first part of the calculation. I'll do it in a moment. And the second part of the calculation is going to be what amount is outstanding on the 3rd of February. Anything that's older than the 4th of January would be over a month old on the 3rd of February. So here was another invoice. The person purchased stock from us on the 31st of December, spent New Year's Day or New Year's Eve purchasing stock from us, maybe for a party or something, and this stock here, this amount of 2,270, was not paid anywhere. They didn't pay us off anything. What they did do, though, is that they returned 454 Rand's worth of that stock the next day. It says, on the 4th of January. The goods were originally purchased on the 31st of December, and they returned some of it. So they don't owe us that whole amount because they returned 454. But we have to charge interest on 1 month of that amount, and so to do the calculation, the second part of the calculation is this 2270 minus 454, 2,270 Rand, minus the 454 Rand that they returned, because remember over here, they returned stock. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply that by 2%, and these two answers are going to give us the total interest that needs to be charged to the debtor. So there's a break coming up now. Try and do this calculation in the break, and I'll give you the correct answer afterwards.
Thank you so much, Martin. And during this break, you have to look at another exciting competition that we have for you guys. We'll tell you more about it when we come back. Welcome back, guys. What are you waiting for? Have you entered the Beer Prize competition? If you haven't, I don't know what you're waiting for, because we've got that card to be given away, and the closing date is on the 3rd of July. The winner will be announced live on Land Extra Live on the 21st of July. So, guys, better enter right now. All you need to do is to buy yourself the Safeways K53 manual or download the Cool 100 app, which is available for only 59 Rand. So, guys, what are you waiting for? Go to facebook.com/landextra and I'll tell you more about it. Martin?
Thanks very much, Abram, and welcome back, Mindsetters. Before the break, I asked you to calculate the interest given this calculation here. You should have got the answer of 113 Rand and 12 cents if you've done it correctly, because 2% of 1660 is 33 Rand 20, and 2% of this sum in brackets ends up being 79 Rand 52. Add the two together and you get the correct answer of 113 Rand and 12 cents interest that should now be charged to that debtor. Okay, so now let's get on to the main question. Got 15 minutes to do it, where what it says is that using the information given in point 2 above and your answer calculated in 1.4, what we've just done, it says calculate the correct balance of the debtor's control account and the correct total of the debtor's list. So here our aim is to get these two items to balance, and what they've done is they've given us this to us in calculation form. So they're not going to ask us to do this by fixing up the T account and by fixing up our debtors list. What they're asking us to do is to simply show a calculation over here in this table that reconciles the incorrect balances. You see, so here is the debtors control account, so let's mark that one in yellow, and then here is the debtors list, let's mark that one in blue. The debtors control account, we started with 24,900, remember that was the incorrect total, and the debtors list had an incorrect total of 2869. The two numbers don't balance, and now we need to read through the information in order to make the two sums agree, or try and get the right number. First thing we need to do is remember that we should have charged interest, but we didn't. Charging interest is going to affect both of these accounts because it's one of those transactions. Remember at the beginning I said to you, if you haven't recorded the transaction at all, it's going to affect both the control account and the list account. So that interest that we've done in 1.4, remember it says in the question, refer to question 1.4. That interest still needs to be charged to the debtors. And we need to put that in the control account as well as in the list. So that amount was, remember, 113 rand and 12 cents. What we need to do to fix this up is we need to put 113 rand and 12 cents on both sides. So I'm going to add 113,12 on this side, and I'm going to call that interest. So we didn't charge interest at all, and we're going to add an amount of 113 rand and 12 cents on the debit side of debtors control. And at the same time, we didn't actually charge the debtor interest on his personal account either. So we're going to put the 113 rand, sorry, let's just get that right, 113 rand and 12 cents, and again, you can call it interest. So bear in mind that that is not going to affect the reconciliation. If you add 113 to both sides, sorry, you're not going to get a change in the difference. There is just a transaction that was omitted. But we have to work out what the correct total should have been, and in that way it's going to balance. Okay, the next thing we need to do now is go back. Remember the first question asked us to find the mistakes that the bookkeeper has made. And we found that there were two mistakes in the debtors control account. The first one, you remember, is that the debtors allowances journal amount should be on the credit side, and we've actually put it on the debit side. So if you look back at your information here, you remember that we said, let's get back to this ledger. You remember that we said that the debtors control account is wrong because the DAJ amount should have been on the credit side and the CPJ amount should have been on the debit side. Now here's that adjustment that I explained to you earlier. We've got an amount on the wrong side of the ledger. So what we need to do now is we need to double it to put it on the correct side of the ledger. So we need to double this amount first, this 700, and put it on that side. This amount is 700 rand too much on the credit side, so we first need to put 700 rand on the debit side to cancel it out, and then we need to put another 700 rand on the debit side to make sure that this amount ends up being where it should have been. So what that means is we're actually going to debit debtors control with 1,400 rand for this transaction. The first 700 cancels out the incorrect one. The second 700 puts it on the correct side. So if we need to fix this up, we can just go back to our table here, which they're asking us to do. And this affects, remember, the debtors control account only because it was a column total that we put on the incorrect side. So we need to put 1,400 rand in this account, and we can simply write something like correction of error. And maybe just to remind you, you can put CPJ over there because the CPJ amount was on the wrong side. So we're literally adding 1,400 rand to the debit side of debtors control to correct for the fact that we put 700 rand on the wrong side. But that wasn't the only error. If you go back to the information, you will see that the debtors allowances amount is also on the wrong side. This 2,600 is here, but it should have been there. So what we need to do is we need to double the amount. It's going to be 2,600 times 2 gives me 5,200 rand. We should actually have 5,200 rand on this side. The first 2,600 cancels out that incorrect entry, and we end up with 2,600 on that side. So because that's also a column total, it's also going to affect debtors control only. So if we go back to our answer sheet, we should also correct the error of error, and that's going to be a correction of error in the DAJ. Have to write quite small to fit this in, and this is going to be the amount of 5,200. But what's very important is that we're making that entry on the credit side of the debtors control account, which means that it needs to be in brackets. We need to subtract 5,200 from the incorrect debtors control total. Okay, so now we've done made the corrections of the mistakes that the inexperienced bookkeeper has made. Now we can go through all of the other information points and see what has to be done. And you should always ask yourself, where should the error be corrected? Should it be corrected in the debtor's control account? Should it be corrected in the debtor's list? Or should it be corrected in both? So let's have a look at what it says. Our first piece of information says that the debtor's journal was undercost by 375 Rand. Whenever a journal is undercost, what they mean is that the total, remember the word undercost refers only to a total. So the total was incorrect by 375 Rand. So what you should immediately see is that this affects the debtor's control account. I'm just abbreviating it as DC. It affects the debtor's control account only. So this 375 Rand needs to be put into the debtor's control account. And it comes from the debtor's journal. So what they're literally telling us is that if we look back at the information here, the amount from the debtor's journal, in other words, this amount here, this 52,000 Rand, was undercost by 375. In other words, it's 375 Rand too little. It should be 52,375. 52375. So the way we fix it, we're just short 375 Rand on the debit side of our debtor's control account. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our answer sheet and put 375 Rand over here. And what we'll do is also say that it's the correction of an error. And this error was made in the DJ. Okay, so we're adding the 375 because the debtor's journal was undercost. Let's look at the next piece of information. Next piece of information tells us that goods that were sold on credit to G Glass on the 11th of January were in error recorded in the account of G Glasser. So what we've actually done, we sold goods to one debtor, G Glass, and by mistake we recorded it in the account of another debtor, G Glasser. So what's happened is we've put this amount in the incorrect account. What you need to see, mindsetters, is that this isn't going to affect anything. All that we actually need to do is fix the individual accounts of these two debtors, but that's not going to change the total of the debtors list, because we're going to add the amount to G Glass and subtract it from G Glasser. All that's going to do is change their two individual accounts, but the total in the debtors list is not going to be affected in any way, and neither is the total in our debtors control account, because our debtors control account doesn't deal with individual accounts anyway. These two accounts, G Glass and G Glasser, these relate to individual debtors, so actually what's going to happen is there's going to be no effect on our total, because we just take from one debtor and add to another debtor. It's not going to affect the total in any way. So in fact here, we've done this transaction already. There's no entry that needs to be made. Okay, our next one here tells us that the correct total of the bank and discount allowed column. When we see the word column, we should always know that it affects the general ledger only. It affects the debtor's control account in the general ledger only. It's not going to affect the debtor's individual account because we're dealing with a column total. It's got two hints there, total and column. So it says that the correct column total is 51,005 Rand, and it's the one for bank and discount allowed. So let's go back to our T account. If we go back to our T account here, what they've told us is that this figure, this bank and discount allowed figure, is wrong. We've made some mistake in copying it. We've written 51,500, and what the question is telling us is that, let me just get to the right page here. What the question is telling us is that it should have been 51,005 Rand. So to fix this mistake, we're going to change it from 51,500. It should be 51,005, and that means that there is a difference of 51,500 minus 51,005. What has to happen is we have got a difference of 495 Rand. But this 495 Rand is on the credit side, we've subtracted too much from debtors control. We've subtracted 51,500 Rand, when in fact we should have subtracted only 51,005. So the way we fix it is we're going to put this amount of 495 Rand that I've just calculated, we need to put on the debit side of debtors control. There needs to be 495 Rand here so that it cancels out the wrong amount over there. All we have to do is add that number of 495 to our debtors control account. And again, because it was a total, we're only looking at the debtors control account. It's not going to affect in any way our debtors list. Let's just move this up so you can see it more clearly. Remember, the pink on this side is the list. The yellow on the other side is the debtors control T account in my general ledger. So what I'm going to do here is I'm also just going to call it correction of error. And this was the correction of the error in the CRJ. Okay, now what we've done is we've finished those entries. We just have to go and check and see what else there is. So if you look down here, we've got another item which says, goods sold to a debtor, T. Toms, for 140 Rand, was correctly recorded in the debtor's journal, but it was posted to the credit side of T. Tom's account in the debtor's ledger. So we're dealing only with the account of T. Tom's, who is an individual debtor. It's one person. Because T. Tom's is an individual debtor, that means the mistake is going to be fixed in the list only. So the amount was 140 Rand, correctly recorded in the debtor's journal. So what that means is that our column total for the debtor's journal is 100% correct. But it was posted to the wrong side. It was posted to the credit side of T. Tom's account. So we should have posted that. We should have debited his account with 140 because we sold goods to a debtor. We sold goods to him for 140 Rand. Therefore, his account should have increased by 140 Rand. But what we did is we posted it to the wrong side. We actually posted it to the credit side, of 140 Rand. So to fix the error, we firstly need to cancel the incorrect credit and put the correct debit in. So we're actually going to put 280 Rand on the debit side of his individual account because the first 140 cancels out the wrong amount and the second 140 is the entry we should originally have made. And again, because we're dealing with the individual account and it affects the list only, we're not going to make any entry in the debtor's control account in the general ledger. So if we go back to our information here, we need to put 280 Rand needs to be added to this account, and we can also call it a correction of an error. Okay, so the final adjustment that we need to make, or the final piece of information that they tell you, is that interest must be charged to the overdue account of G. Glasser. Well, remember, that was the first thing that we did. We calculated the interest as 113 Rand and 12 cents in question 1.4, and what we did is we've already actually put that interest in. Here it is, we've charged it to the debtor over here, and it's also over there. There's the interest that we've charged. So that comes to the end of the adjustments, and now this is the time, mindsetters, that you cross your fingers and you just hope and pray that the answer comes to the right amount. What we're going to do now is check that we've now fixed the correct outstanding balances by adding all of these up and checking that the two sides are the same. So let me grab my calculator here. Let's first work out the debtor's control account. I'm going to take the opening balance of 24,900 Rand. I'm going to add the amount of 113 Rand and 12 cents for interest. Then I'm going to add 1,400 Rand for the correction of the first error. Then I'm going to subtract for the correction of the second error 5,200 Rand. And then I'm going to add 375. And I'm going to add 495 Rand. Press equals and convert it to a decimal. The answer comes to 22083 and 12 cents. Let's just do it in another color. 22083 and 12 cents. Now, we need to now check that the other side adds up to the same figure. And if we take our calculator to this side, we're going to take 20869 plus 113 rand and 12 cents, and we're going to add 280 to that, and here my answer comes to 21162 and 12 cents. Now mine said, as you see, sorry, let me just write that in a different figure, a different color, 21162 and 12 cents. Do you see mine said is that we have
time, we're really out of time.
Okay.
We'll post the answer for the guys, and make sure that you get your notes because the solutions are on the notes as well. Thank you, Martin, and thank you, guys. Thank you to the Department of Basic Education for making this show possible. From the bottom of our hearts, we really appreciate you and we love you. Peace.